Without realizing just how time-consuming it would be, I recently played pretty much every PSP game that I've ever played just to see if they still hold up. Bearing in mind I remember enjoying the majority of these games, and remember, if you disagree with any of the rankings that I put up here, then hate the game and not the player. That is if I hate the game too. Basically just please agree, it's all I have left. We happy? We gonna get along? Okay, let's get started. Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. Final Fantasy VII is the biggest Final Fantasy game and it has at least one spin-off. This one is Zack's story, and it will leave you an emotional wreck time and time again, with a brilliant story and an irreplaceable main character voice actor. Well, like, should be irreplaceable.
Me? Gungaga.
Me? Gungaga.
Look at how they massacred my boy. What have they done to you? Burnout Legends. Burnout Legends isn't just the best racing game on PSP, it's one of the best racing games ever. Don't quote me on this, but Burnout pretty much invented the takedown on racing games. Even if they didn't invent it, they definitely perfected it. It's so fun crashing into cars on this because just check this out. And of course there are game modes that center around this mechanic. This is still crazy fun. I'm not a huge fan of racing games anymore, but this is still such a blast. It's actually the game that made me want to become a professional car crasher. Any of the Monster Hunter games. Believe it or not, World wasn't actually the first Monster Hunter game. Until a few years ago, Monster Hunter had sort of this mass cult following. They're just brilliant games where you kill monsters and upgrade all your gear. No explanation can really do justice just how addictive these games are. And Monster Hunter addiction is nothing to joke about. Swinging your large weapons around with your friends is way more fun, but it's still a very solid single player experience. They're all pretty much the same game, but with each game a lot more stuff was included, so I'm placing them all here. 007 from Russia with love. Instantly, the first level made me laugh because this music, it's just like we're getting up to some mild mischief. It's a pretty standard action game, but it did actually have some nice ideas where you can shoot at certain things like a grenade to make it drop and go off. You can shoot a rope that people are rappelling down to make them fall. But the best part of this game is the great voice acting.
Who's fallen quite in love with you.
But I've never even heard of a Tatiana Romanova.
Yeah, it's still pretty fun. Very funny though.
But I've never even heard of a Tatiana Romanova.
SmackDown vs. Raw 2006. I'm putting 2006 here, but really any SmackDown vs. Raw game will do. These are still the definitive wrestling experiences in video games, with a brilliant soundtrack that made getting viruses from LimeWire just so worth it. This is also the game where some people discovered that they can play games with just one hand. And not that I tried, but no, you can't do a Fulfill Your Fantasy match with Undertaker and the Boogeyman. Tony Hawk's Underground 2 and Tony Hawk's Project 8. Even though in Project 8 you can do this, personally I prefer Underground 2. Underground 2 is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, skateboarding game of all time. It's kind of like Jackass meets skateboarding. It's a pretty chaotic game, and Project 8 doesn't have the same sort of chaos, but it's still really fun. And these are more examples of games that forged my music playlist back in the day. Also, does anyone remember this OG YouTube meme? This was back in like 2006, so I would genuinely like to ask you, how's your back doing? Is your arthritis kicking in yet? Daxter. Oh, Daxter. This was my first ever PSP game. It was a platformer where you play as Daxter from Jak and Daxter, just without the Jak, cause Jak's off somewhere. Jak is off somewhere else. Not jacking off. Anyway, I believe Daxter is described as a ginger otzel, which is a mix between a Weeter and an Ottel. Hang on. Which is a mix between a weasel, which is a mix between an otter and a weasel. But even though Jak's not in it, so good. Still one of my favorite platformers. Peter Jackson's Donkey Kong. Big Kong, King Kong. I do want to preface this by saying that the PS2 one is better, as you have more characters and levels on that one, so there's no Jack Black to talk to on this one, which is a real tragedy. However, they really managed to capture the atmosphere of Skull Island, and it is very tense at times. There's no HUD which adds to the atmosphere. Playing as Jack is an FPS game, and there are absolutely parts that made me far out of fear. Playing as King Kong feels like you're getting payback on the creatures for scaring you as Jack. Also, I don't know how, but on a dinky little PSP, they really managed to make you feel the movements behind King Kong's big boned body. He feels heavy. Really cool stuff. kinda holds up. Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. As I'm sure many did, I used to think of this game as God of War meets Star Wars, just with less limbs flying around. However, the way I would describe this game now is God of War Original Trilogy meets Star Wars. I'm like 90% sure it's not considered canon because Starkiller, the guy you play as, is considered one of the most powerful beings in the universe or some shit, which I don't think they wanted to officially be the case. Breath of Fire 3. I like this game for the same reasons I like the Final Fantasy games, which we'll get to a bit later on. But don't worry, don't play as this little silly bitch the whole game. He does grow up at some point and that's when it gets better. Half-minute hero. This one is for my warriors who only last 30 seconds, to prove that you can do a lot in those 30 seconds, and you can be a hero too. I personally cannot relate, because me, I only last 10. This is a quick, fun, challenging little RPG where you have to complete each quest in 30 seconds. Of course there's more to it. It's almost like a puzzle game too, because the quests aren't usually just kill the boss. You have to work out how to complete the quest. Of course there are ways to reset the timer too. It's pretty addictive, not gonna lie. Dynasty Warriors, a game where you can end up defeating 1,000 enemies in a single battle. The PSP games did get better and better with every release, with Strike Force being the best one, and they are actually funny games because there's someone called Cowpea. The first two are similar to the PS2 Dynasty Warriors games, but to a massively reduced scale. They are still fun though, whilst Strike Force has a little bit more depth to it, where you more or less do individual quests, and there's a home hub where you have like a shop and a blacksmith and stuff like that. Having said that though, I did have the most fun with 2. GTA The Stories. So this is Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories. Look, nothing beats going out on a spree, causing absolute chaos, crashing into everything and everyone that you see, and then going home to play some GTA. There's not really much I can say about GTA because everyone knows them. They're GTA, they're fun. I do prefer Vice City Stories though, because you can swim and ride bicycles. Amazing soundtracks, obviously, that's a given, and a lot more fun with cheats, although you don't get stuff like flying cars, which is a shame. And the storylines are actually pretty good and engaging. Mod Nation Racers. I'm a fucking idiot, right? I didn't realize that I've never played this one. The PS Vita was a portable one that I've played, but for my first time playing it the other day, this one wasn't great. It doesn't control very smoothly. Creating is pretty good though. I'd say if you want a portable one, the PS Vita one is the way to go. Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 4. 3 isn't here because basically I don't think 3 exists over here, or something like that. I like these games for the same reason I like Breath of Fire 3. Oh come on! It's classic Final Fantasy, you know why they're good, right? I suppose since I haven't given a description on Final Fantasy, that means I need to go back and talk about Breath of Fire 3. Breath of Fire has a brilliant cast of characters, a fun, engaging story, and has all the best elements of a turn-based RPG. Flat Out Head On. I used to pretty much play this game solely for the mini-games. The gimmick in the Flat Out games are that you can get flung through the windscreen and ragdoll around. So there's game modes where you fling yourself from the car and use yourself as a bowling ball or a basketball, or you just see how high you can go. Going back to it though, it wasn't that fun. MGS Portable Ops. Look, I still don't know if this one is canon or not, but it's an MGS game that you could take anywhere. That was good enough for me. On top of deleting people, you also kidnap them by dragging them into the back of your truck. Yep, that's our hero Big Boss. A murdering kidnapper. There was also a Portable Ops Plus, but that was mainly for multiplayer, and since the servers are down, I won't include that one. MGS Portable Ops? Yeah, still holds up. Tomb Raider Legend. I have heard that Anniversary is better than this one, but I've never played that one. The controls are pretty jarring to go back to be honest, which is a bit of a pain when you need precise jumps. It's still a pretty fun action game to work your way through, but my god is some of the dialogue absolutely horrific to listen to.
At least when she's leaping about on cliffs, they stay put. Man, I don't know what she's thinking. She's crazy.
I can hear you, you know, and it's a tad distracting.
Sorry, Lara. Shutting up now.
Okay, Google, why is my pee-pee hard?
According to Healthline, hot urine is usually a
Okay, sorry if that triggered yours as well.
Odd place.
Kinda holds up. 300, March to Morning Glory. Right, I'm gonna level with you here. This game is shit. It's repetitive and very basic, but there's something about it that made me play this game a lot. Even at 12 years old, I remember thinking to myself, this is not a good game, I should not be enjoying myself, yet I am. When we all now know that at 12 years old what I should have been thinking about was the political and economic state of the world. GTA Chinatown Wars. Another GTA game, but this one is different to the stories. It's a bit more arcadey and has sort of returned to its PS1 roots in style with the bird's eye view camera. It's fun. Driving can drive itself into a fucking bin for all I care though. Lord of the Rings Tactics. I like this game for the same reasons I like Final Fantasy Tactics. Okay, we won't do that again. This is just a fairly small game that takes you through the events of all 3 Lord of the Rings movies with cutscenes from the movie showing between each level. Is it amazing? No. Is it a good time killer? Absolutely. I'm sure you can see from the gameplay what kind of game it is. It is pretty challenging on higher difficulties and you do have to think a bit more about what you're doing. Hence the name Tactics. But honestly, it's still pretty shallow and not too in-depth. Also, you can play through the story as the goodies or the baddies. It's up to you. For some reason though, Lurch doesn't die in this, so he appears in so many levels. Dissidia and Dissidia 12 Duodecim. I don't understand the title of a second game, but I'll look past that. These games were tight, they still are tight. Don't quote me on this, but I believe they were the first Final Fantasy games to have a crossover with all the mainline games. You could have Squall versus Sephiroth, Cloud versus Kefka, Jet versus Jet. With a highly addictive battle system where you're constantly jumping around the map, beating up your opponent, it makes more sense to get the second one because it serves as a prequel, and then you go through the exact same story as the first one anyway. So I honestly think the second one pretty much just classes as like an expansion on the first one. Fired Up, a game where you drive a car filled with guns to blow up other cars. So basically it's a game that every 8-year-old thought they'd invent. When I grow up, I'm gonna make a game where you're a car with guns and you blow up other cars. Yeah, of course you are, son. And to be honest, I think it might have actually been made by a team of 8-year-olds. It was just plain dumb fun though, so if you're not expecting much from it, kinda holds up. Medieval Resurrection. Even with all the big bones in this game, it is in fact called Resurrection and not Resurrection. I've made that mistake before. This is a reimagining of the first medieval game on PS1, so it's pretty much the same as that, but also different. Wow, what a good description. Wow, thank you. It got a lot of flack for an added character who lives in your eye socket and is constantly chatting shit.
You, Fortescue! At last! Come, get up! We got things to do!
And I can see why he'd be annoying, but to be honest, I didn't mind him that much. Then again, I didn't have him living in my eye. Also, as the level loads, you always got a pretty funny description of where you're going, and it was always just such a charming addition.
Dan's Crypt. The best place to go if you're looking for a dead Dan.
Peace Walker pushed the system to its absolute limit in almost every aspect. Also, you can hunt a Rathalos and a Tiger X from Monster Hunter, but I never quite made it that far. And like Monster Hunter and jacking off, it's more fun with your friends, but still good enough on your own. Unfortunately, this game actually did come out at a time where I wasn't really playing PSP anymore, so I didn't actually get a chance to be fully invested into it. But going back to it, it still holds up, so maybe this time around I'll actually complete it. And finally get to those Tiger X and Rathaloses, or to be Rathalos. Lego Star Wars 2. There are thousands of Lego games by now. Maybe they've gotten a bit stale, but Lego Star Wars was the first Lego game made by TT. There were other Lego games that came before it, like the classic Lego Racers, but TT didn't make that. We played the first Lego Star Wars game to death, so the second one, also coming out on PSP, was a godsend. Also something to note, the characters didn't talk back then, and so all the humor had this sort of slapstick feel to it. And it just worked brilliantly in its favor. SSX on Tour, an over-the-top crazy snowboarding game where you can do insane, unearthly, McTwisty, flippity-dippity tricks. God, I feel like a middle-aged man trying to rap. Another one of those games where I just pretty much imported the music playlist straight onto my MP3 player. I hope there's no one out there asking right now what an MP3 player is. Just straight up good time. Final Fantasy Tactics, not to be confused with the tiny little minty breath fresheners. Originally on the PS1, this Final Fantasy is probably one of the best Final Fantasy stories written. It also adapted from a standard turn-based combat to what you see here, a more open area where you move your characters around individually and attack and shit. Similar style to what we saw in the Lord of the Rings Tactics up there, but a lot more in-depth. That description just doesn't do it justice. Something to note, the frame rate is awful at times on the PSP one. There is a fair amount of added content though. There's also a Game Boy Advance one with a different story which is brilliant too. Though my favourite part of the game is how everyone is just moonwalking on the spot. Metal Gear Acid 1 and 2. I'm pretty positive these aren't canon, but I actually really like the characters and creepy vibe of these games. Whilst it's not your standard MGS game, it's kind of like the tactics games disguised as a card game. I do remember being pretty disappointed in that at first, but once I got into it, it's actually fun in its own right. Metal Gear Acid is also a very fitting title though, because it is a trip. I was considering placing this in kind of holds up, but nah. These are fun, unique games. And they do, in fact, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. It's classic Assassin's Creed to a majorly reduced scale. I honestly don't know what else to say about it. Everyone knows Assassin's Creed at this point, so I'll just share the fact that if you buy Assassin's Creed from the game, your receipt will say Ass Creed on it, which sounds like a way sexier game. I honestly wasn't sure how Motorstorm would translate to a PSP game. The PS3 one was one of the first PS3 games my brothers and I ever played at our cousin's house, and it blew us all away. Obviously the graphics aren't as good on this one, like the mud isn't so muddy, but for a dirt track racing game, it's really fun on PSP, I gotta admit. Pursuit Force Extreme Justice, just a straight up fun action game where you play as a policeman and you can jump from car to kill/arrest your enemies. There are on-foot sections as well, but it mainly takes place in vehicles. Little Big Planet, man, something about going back to Little Big Planet is enough to make a grown man cry. The music and atmosphere are so nostalgic, so it still makes it an absolute joy going through the story levels. Unfortunately, since PSP servers got shut down, you can't download other people's insane creations, which was always the best part about Little Big Planet. Well, aside from Stephen Fry's narration, of course. You can still create though, and not to brag, but I made this. I can't say it still really holds up though without the online element. Worms Open Warfare 1 and 2. I never owned them, a friend of mine did, and he used to go around school bragging about having worms. The teachers did look concerned at this, and I don't know why. It's okay though, because he shared his worms with us. Oh, I think I hear it now. I think they thought he was talking about his bum worms, which is also the case. You create a team of worms, you and your opponent take it in turns to try and kill each other's worms. It's more fun than it sounds. Untold Legends Brotherhood of the Blade and the Warrior's Code. RPG games. On both games you pick out 4 classes to be, and as with a lot of games, again, it's more fun with friends. Whilst both games play out very similarly to each other, they have a very different tone. A Warrior's Code is the second one, but they went for a bit more of a cartoony, goofy style, and it's a bit easier as well. However, the first one has that classic RPG, darkish, grim kind of tone. The second one does have a bit more story to it, so I don't know which one I prefer. Wipeout, a futuristic spacey racing game where you pick up weapons and can blow up other spaceships. For some reason I remember it feeling a lot faster and smoother though, and I remember it being a lot more fun. Prince of Persia, The Forgotten Sands. There are 3 Prince of Persia games on the PSP. 2 of them I didn't play though because I've played them on PS2 anyways, and I'm pretty sure they're almost the exact same, so I could add them here if I wanted, but since I haven't played them I won't. However, The Forgotten Sands is different, and it's different to its PS3 counterpart as well. This one is a side-scrolling platformer instead, with some pretty addictive gameplay and unique elements where you control sand. It sounds crazy, but it works. X-Men 2. Rise of the Apocalypse? I said that like it's a question because I couldn't actually remember the title. It's X-Men 2 Legends. No. X-Men Legends 2 Rise of the Apocalypse. God, I remember thinking this was one of the best superhero games around back in the day. And I can see why. It plays out like an RPG game, and you have like a nice, I think, 15 character roster. To create a team of 4 where you can swap from character to character, it's still a pretty solid game to be honest. Patapon. Patapon. Probably one of the most unique games on this list. There are 3 entries, and they all deserve to be here. It's like if Monster Hunter was a side-scrolling rhythm game. Except it's not that much like Monster Hunter, so I don't even know why I said that, really. You don't control the characters necessarily, you press buttons to smack these big old sexy drums, and different beats do different things. It's a very good time killer, and I think Patapon will be stuck in my head my whole life. Tekken 6. If you tell me you don't know Tekken, I'd assume you were Tekken the piss. It's fun, but okay if you don't know what it is, it's a beat 'em up game. I mean, you can just see, it's fun. It's followed a formula for years and it just works. Surely the fact that an 8th installment is about to come out should tell you that people still enjoy them enough for them to continue, so it's a good game. Now I can't prove it because the recording messed up, so I can't prove it, but I did actually go on to win this fight, by the way. Crash of the Titans. I think this game got a wee bit of a slating when it came out, but my theory is it wouldn't have if it didn't use the Crash Bandicoot name, because that's just a lot to live up to. He's got some sweet tats now, and the game's pretty charming, funny and fun. Maybe it does rely a little bit too much on using the monsters, when honestly it's pretty fun just playing as Crash. It's still a fun platforming game, and controlling monsters is fun, I just wish it wasn't so often. Okay, I need to quieten down for this one because I don't want people to know I like it. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Tag Force. There's like 3 and I don't even remember which one I played, so I'll just say any of them. They all look the same. It's like a Pokemon game, if a Pokemon game was actually Yu-Gi-Oh! You go around talking to people, challenging them to duels, buying booster packs to build your deck. You know what? No. I'm not gonna be embarrassed anymore. You can still be cool and like Yu-Gi-Oh! Dude, is that Yu-Gi-Oh? What? No, I don't even know what Yu-Gi-Oh is. Someone just came around earlier and left this on the screen. I don't know what it is. Oh, because I love Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, man, I was just kidding. Like, I like it well, do you like it? I like it if you like it, but if you don't, you just haven't been on it. If you don't like it, then I'm just kidding as well. I don't like it. Unless you do. Do you like it? Because I don't. Unless you do, don't. Siphon Filter, Logan Shadow, and Dark Mirror. I believe these are the last 2 games in the series. Really solid action gameplay where you can even interact with the environment in some places and throw people overboard, and they're just solid action games. The classic taser is brought back in them as well, and they're unintentionally funny at times, and that just makes it so much more enjoyable. I absolutely love these games, and I still do. And last but not least, Carol Vorderman's Sudoku. I'm just kidding. Thank you for watching. I hope you got a fair amount of nostalgia if you played any of these. I also hope you consider the liking and subscribing and all that. I appreciate you making it this far if you did, and I'll catch you later. Bye.